Hello, welcome along to the Northern Agenda podcast, a show that puts a northern spin on what is going on in the political world. I'm Rob Parsons and I'm on location in Liverpool today. Every man and their dog in the political world is on the Liverpool waterfront currently for Labour conference, and that is what's going on at the moment. We're on day 3. It's been an interesting few days of debates, speeches, panel events, warm white wine. I've been experiencing all of that, and we're actually just down the road today at the Liverpool Echo's offices in their purpose-built podcast studio, which is looking resplendent, and I am alongside 2 behemoths of northern regional political coverage, Liam Thorp from the Liverpool Echo and Jo Timan from the Manchester Evening News. Chaps, how are you?
I'm starting to feel like it's day 3, is what I would say, both in terms of how long some of the days have felt and how heavy some of the nights have been.
Not to give too much away, but you were clutching a bottle of Iron Brew when I came along to the office this morning, which does tell part of the story about what you've been up to the last couple of days.
I just believe in Scottish produce. That's all. That's all that is. No, the thing about Labour Party conferences, it's a great chance to sort of meet up with a lot of people that you sort of vaguely know. You know, obviously lots of the media in London. Whether it's politicians and others, so it's rude not to have a couple of beers as well along the way. Although my wife and my 2-year-old child are now starting to ask where the hell I've been, so I'll be quite glad when it's over.
You might have some relationship rebuilding to do when you get back home later. Jo, what's conference been like for you so far?
Yeah, like you said, it's good to bump into people. It's not been the late night bar schmoozing that's kept me up. It's actually the Irish pub underneath my hotel.
Yeah, well, we're staying in the same hotel, and let's not name the hotel, but it is a perfectly good hotel, but its location is in the loudest part of Liverpool city centre. It's above an Irish bar, and it's surrounded by karaoke bars. I think anyone who knows Liverpool will know which bit we're talking about. My room, which I got into on Sunday, had 6 bunk beds in it, which I was quite surprised to see. I'm not quite sure what they were expecting me to do with all these bunk beds. And yeah, the karaoke was blaring until 1-2 in the morning.
Easily 2 a.m, yeah.
My big regret is that you are not bunking in with a stag do. I think that would have been great while you tried to focus on writing about devolution, and they're just doing mad stag antics.
The dullest stag do guest ever. I think if you enjoy the sound of, because there's like different karaoke bars, and you can hear the singing from all of them coming in at the same time.
Kind of merge together, don't they?
So you get sort of Sweet Caroline, and then also a bit of Cyndi Lauper, and maybe some Meatloaf coming in.
What would you want?
I mean, which is, if you like that, then you are very much in the right place.
If you like that all at the same time, until 2 a.m. Then
yeah. So I've been on the caffeine certainly in the last 2 days, but the wider conference, I guess it's like we were discussing on the podcast last week. People at home, the average voter in the north of England, is probably only barely paying attention to what goes on at conference. I guess it's more important to the Labour activists, to the media, in terms of how they frame what the current story is with Labour, and for members who want to feel like there's some direction, some positivity to the party. So I mean, if you had one word to sum up what the Labour Party conference has been like so far, what word did you use?
Flat.
Right.
I've found the vibe fairly flat. Not kind of mutinous or depressed. Or obviously the government is struggling massively. Keir Starmer is struggling massively in many ways. A part of me thought it would be a little bit more mutinous, but it's just a bit flat. The other word I would probably use, if I'm not stealing too, is corporate. It feels very corporate. Lots of sponsors around. It doesn't feel massively kind of like, we were here last year. Obviously, Labour had just got in after a historic election, and there was understandable positivity. There was people clearly thrilled at that result. I think now, a year on, and with everything that's happened, just lacking a bit of energy, I think, apart from at the Irish Party last night.
Absolutely. I mean, it's certainly a corporate event, but one of the things I always enjoy doing is going around, seeing what freebies I can get. And the best freebie is from the CWU, the union, which has been giving out Oasis-style bucket hats. I've got one here.
Yep.
Pop it on my head so you can just see what that looks like. What do you think of that?
It's a look. I'll say that. I'm not sure Gallagher would go for it with you, Rob.
I don't think I can pull it. I don't think the glasses and really set it
You've
off.
got a bit of like, you know, dad on holiday vibe.
I mean, that's my vibe.
Yeah, that is your vibe
to
most
be
of the time.
honest.
I'm surprised you didn't get one of Steve Reed's Build Baby Build hats. Though.
Yeah, I mean, those were going like hotcakes, weren't they?
I think that might be the cringiest moment of the conference.
He was signing them, wasn't he?
He was signing them. Yeah, it's I found that quite. And then I went in the media room, and half the media room were wearing them. And I was like, well, that's probably.
I mean, if there's one thing about journalists, we love a freebie.
Yeah,
hence why I'm wearing this. It is mostly for my kids. I'm going to take it off now.
We've got the screen grab now, Rob.
Yeah, Joe, what's one word that you'd use to describe conference?
I'd probably say, I mean, flat is right, but I'd also say confused, in the sense that a lot of the attention's around Andy Burnham, and the message I'm getting from people is they're not happy with the way that, you know, he's not dispelled rumours that he's going to become leader. But at the same time, not many people are happy with Keir Starmer as leader. So you've got sort of disapproval for the current leadership. And at the same time, you've got an alternative that's kind of being pitched to them. And no one's really happy with either sort of option at the moment, or at least with the latter, the way in which it's been presented. So it's a bit confused. I don't really know what people want.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll come on to Burnham, because that is, you know, from a northern point of view, the big topic of the
from
conference.
every point of view. That's
from every point of view. And I mean, I would say maybe anxious would be a word you could use, because the obvious context is reform well up in the polls. Keir Starmer's, I think, personal approval ratings are as low as any Prime Minister. He's got two potential events that could go well. The more likely event is that they're going to go badly. So you've got the budget in November, where there's probably going to be some unpalatable decisions Rachel Reeves is going to have to make, and then the local elections in May, where, you know, Labour are probably going to take a drubbing. They're going to lose some councils. It's going to be bad news. So that, you know, they've got all that coming up, and at most events that I went to, whether it was speeches in the main hall or panel events, the threat of reform and what they could potentially do in power, and what can we do to stop them, and the sort of dark direction that they're taking politics, that was sort of the ever-present backdrop to pretty much everything that was discussed, including, you know, all the chat about Andy Burnham, because I feel like if reform weren't ahead in the polls, if Labour weren't really struggling, Andy Burnham, there wouldn't be so many people interested in hearing what Andy Burnham has to say.
He's seen as the, you know, the best chance of beating reform. That's definitely what people say. I mean, he was popular with members anyway, but as this threat becomes increasingly existential, you know, people are looking at him and thinking, you know, all these northern constituencies that are likely to fall, you know, he's the only candidate they think can kind of take that on. I said in my piece yesterday about the Chancellor's speech that, you know, there's two people kind of haunting this conference, and that's Nigel Farage and Andy Burnham, and both of them are a massive threat to Keir Starmer in different ways. You know, it says a lot really about the kind of red on red war that's now developing, that, you know, Rachel Reeves really quite explicitly took a dig at Andy Burnham in her, you know, keynote conference speech, saying how there's nothing progressive in terms of adding a load of debt after Burnham's comments about the bond markets. And she said it even more explicitly in an interview on LBC, where she said he was sounding a bit like Liz Truss. I mean, Joe, you'll know this, that relations have never been great between Burnham and Downing Street, but they are now, you know, historically low.
There was a period though, like immediately after Labour got in, where it looked like things were getting better. All the mayors got invited into Downing Street, didn't they?
It was just before the election. It was when Sue Gray got involved. She was credited with sort of being a bit of a peacemaker.
And now she's gone.
And I think relations stayed. I mean, the kind of things you'd hear from all mayors really for the first sort of few months, let's say 6 months to a year, were relatively positive. And it's only more recently you start hearing the sort of tone changing generally. I think it was when we were at the Convention of the North earlier this year that we started noticing a bit of a change in tone. But obviously Andy's taken it much further now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is true to say that there is an impatience amongst Labour metro mayors for things to change more quickly. They want to get their hands on power more quickly. And I think all the mayors would say that, you know, things like they want a tourist tax, they want powers over, you know, post-16 skills, that kind of thing. But I don't think it's only really Andy Burnham who has gone as far as he has in terms of putting forward an alternative sort of set an alternative manifesto, basically, like a whole set of alternative policies that is very different to what Labour is currently offering. I mean, I think it's fair to say, Joe, you spent a lot of this conference chatting to MPs, to members, to people from the government about what they think about Burnham. As we were discussing on the podcast last week, he's done 2 big feature interviews where the timing was obviously going to clash with this conference coming up. He's put himself in a position where he's now a very prominent critic of the government, even though he says he's doing it, to support them and to try and save local councillors from losing their seats next May. What have people been saying to you about him and how he's gone about it?
Well, it won't surprise you to know that the government aren't best pleased with him. But what surprised me is that people who are supportive of him, who will say in the same breath he would make a great leader, he'd be much better than Keir, we want him to be Prime Minister, they're not happy with how he's behaved recently. As you said, he would say he is making suggestions for how the direction that Keir should take the party in, but he's not ruled out challenging him as leader. And people aren't happy about that. I mean, like I said, even his supporters have sort of privately said, Keir was only really going in one direction. They were expecting, by the time it comes to the local elections, when they're expecting huge losses for Labour, that might be the end of the Starmer leadership anyway. The writing will be on the wall then. So he's gone too early is the consensus that I've picked up from people. And as I said, even people who want to see him become Prime Minister.
I would agree with that. That's the vibe I've been picking up. And it's also, people can't understand what his sort of game is right now, because to state the obvious, he doesn't have a seat, doesn't have an obvious sort of route in at the moment. I just felt that if Andy Burnham had come into this conference and not done those kind of big interventions beforehand, but just started to continue to talk about his ideas. He's an incredibly successful and popular mayor of Greater Manchester, so he has all that cachet. People were already talking about him as a potential leader. If he'd come in, as Joe says, the Prime Minister is on a downward trajectory, he could have had a really solid conference and it only would have continued that momentum in a kind of organic way. But instead, he's just gone straight in, 2-footed. I'm afraid I just don't buy this thing about I was just doing, laying out my ideas and, in an interview or whatever. Like the timing, you decide to do that interview at that time, those 2 interviews at that time, one with the Telegraph.
Yeah,
that is a decision that has been made. He must have known how that was going to go down with Downing Street.
It's been interesting because his people were quite clear, trying to make it quite clear that at conference he wasn't going to be such a visible presence. He was only going to do
How's that going?
2 or 3 events rather than the sort of 10 to 12 that he would normally.
Which has made, by the way, the 2 or 3 events that he has done like the hottest ticket in town.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I went to one of them, which was a Guardian podcast recording at a little cafe sort of on the waterfront, and there was a huge queue to get in. Like once all the media got in, there's pretty much a journalist from every media title in the country.
The press room had cleared out in the
and it was absolutely mobbed in there. And then he did that event where the Guardian did a really good job of. It's quite a long event, so they had quite a lot of time to question him, and they asked him they really put him on the spot about the things that he said in these interviews, what specifically he was criticising about Labour. Had MPs been approaching him about standing for leadership? And interestingly, he was a bit more vague this time than he was when the Telegraph asked him the same question. The Telegraph asked him, have MPs been approaching you about being leader? And he told the Telegraph, yes, they have. He could quite easily have said, I don't really want to discuss that, or I have conversations all the time. But he said it deliberately, gave a quite provocative answer, and it felt like he was trying to row back on that a little bit.
He's claiming that he didn't actually say that now, so it's quite extraordinary. Like it not only with the sort of comments that have led to the comparisons with Liz Truss about sort of borrowing in the bond markets, but even with the sort of MPs approaching him. I think I was listening back to the Guardian interview last night, and I think he was saying. I speak to MPs all the time. I wasn't saying that they've approached me to be leader, so it's all very confused now. It does feel like he's rowing back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could well be that after the May local elections, things will be a lot worse for the Labour Party, and that if he did have his eyes on, really pushing to be leader, that would be the time when he would make his move. But I think he's like like a sprinter who's
it's a marathon, not a
or a
sprint.
10k runner who's like gone out sprinting speed for the first kilometre and now he's knackered.
Much like this conference and my social schedule, I should have known that this is a marathon and not a sprint, and so should Andy Burnham. And he's probably in a similar position to me now, where he's sort of gone a bit too hard too early, and is now feeling the effects of it. To sort of stretch that narrative as much as I can. I think that the thing that's important though is that regardless of all of this, he is the only real alternative. I just don't see. People will talk about Wes Streeting, a very impressive politician and a great communicator, but there's no real suggestion that his time would be now. I don't think.
And the problem with Streeting is
he's a London MP.
Streeting is excellent, and we've interviewed him on this podcast before, and he was a very polished performer. But his vision for the country is, I don't think, particularly different to Starmer's, whereas Burnham is setting out
it's a total alternative.
Some very different, radical ideas, like the kind that he sets out in Head North, the book that you were involved in.
Thanks for dropping that in.
And
still available.
But also, things that he's been saying since then about reforming council tax so that homes in the southeast pay more, so that people in the north don't have to pay as much.
Let's not forget in the book he talks about getting rid of the whipping system. He is a man with radical ideas, and I've always admired that about Andy Burnham. Like, he's not afraid to kind of say, something that people might scoff at initially. I remember when he first mentioned that in the book about the getting rid of the whipping system, and I sort of asked a few people about it, and people were like, it's ridiculous. Like, how would anything get done? And he was like, well, at the moment we just have this system in place where everyone just gets told how to vote, and no one really gets to kind of vote with their, obviously when it's a whipped vote, he said it lacks authenticity. And the more I read it, the more I thought, that's a really interesting idea, actually. And he was not afraid to put it out there. So you're right to say that, a current member of the government like Wes Streeting, who is an impressive politician, is going to be seen as Starmer light in many ways.
Continuity Starmer.
Yeah, you can't accuse Andy Burnham of that at all. And so while he may have gone a bit early, while he may have annoyed people, there isn't an obvious alternative other than him, and I think he's still got quite a good shot if he can find a way.
And this is why I say I think it's confused, because people clearly aren't happy with the Starmer leadership. A lot of members are unhappy with it, and he is the clear front runner. So actually, you can see the thinking of sort of set your platform out before conference. This is an opportunity to talk about it. I think that just what people have said is it just comes across as a bit desperate at this point. So it's not clear, especially because he hasn't got a seat in Parliament yet.
Or an obvious route in.
What the right approach would have been if he is in fact angling for leadership.
And he has under pressure from The Guardian and other interviewers, he has said he is committed to seeing out his term as Greater Manchester Mayor. So how that's compatible with standing for leadership?
I was going to ask Jo this as our man on the ground in Greater Manchester. He's obviously very, very popular. You were reminding me before that he won all but one ward in Greater Manchester, which is extraordinary, actually, isn't it? You think how many of those there are and how disparate it is in terms of political allegiances and in views and stuff. Do you think it's going to upset voters in Greater Manchester who've only a year ago elected him in for a historic third term?
Yeah, I mean, let's dwell on that statistic a little bit.
Yeah, it's
we're
phenomenal.
Talking about more than 200 council wards, not specific sort of council areas, but the wards within them.
Yeah.
The previous election, his second term, he won every single one, and he only missed out on one this time. So it's quite a record. I mean, places that on the same day at the local elections were voting Conservative, we're electing Lib Dem councillors, we're electing Green councillors, we're electing in the most recent local elections in Greater Manchester a couple of years ago, in 2024, they were electing independent candidates based on sort of the war in Gaza, and he was still winning all of those wards. So he really has a really broad voting coalition.
Yeah.
I personally think, and I think this has been confirmed by a lot of the people that my colleagues at the MEN have spoken to, we've been out sort of vox popping in Chadderton, I think last week. Not everyone is a supporter of him, but if you are a supporter of him and you think he's done a good job for Greater Manchester, and you think he stands up for Greater Manchester, why would you not want him in number 10? I don't think his behaviour is necessarily going to reflect badly from a voter's point of view. I think the danger is, and I can say I know that, some local leaders, some sort of party members locally as well, are concerned that this sort of souring of relationship that he's going to have, that is already had with number 10 and other government departments, is going to be a blocker in terms of getting investment and having that voice in Westminster.
You could argue at the moment that his relationship with the Conservative government was better than his current relationship with the Labour government.
Because number 10 is not going to want to do anything that that is too kind.
He doesn't want to give
does him too much of a favour.
And if you look at things like Northern Powerhouse Rail, now I'm not saying this is true. I don't have any intel on it, but we're seeing that delayed again. Does that start to play into the thinking? Northern Powerhouse Rail is Burnham and Rotherham's thing. Is there a sort of sense that we don't want to give Burnham a win? Is that going to start to affect announcements and decisions? I don't know. Yeah. It's become such a sort of frosty and hostile situation that it could start to get in the way of everyday business.
I mean, when I was speaking to one local leader yesterday, the impression I got was that they don't think like Northern Powerhouse Rail is going to be cancelled because of all of this. They're not worried about any specific projects, but they have no doubt that this will have an impact. And from a government perspective, it was put to me sort of, well, why would we help? Why would we go out of our way to give, Andy Burnham what he wants in terms of even just like a timetable? I mean, Northern Powerhouse Rail, we've been waiting for months for an announcement on it. If he's not in a position now to call up number 10 and say, get a move on, why would they sort of stick to his deadline?
And there's other things that Burnham is trying to do, like the Greater Manchester Baccalaureates, the scheme for a specific vocational technical education system in Greater Manchester that is different to the rest of the country, and kids in Greater Manchester will study a particular set of subjects that are relevant to that local economy. But that scheme does require some support from the government to make it work, and I think they're sort of testing it and trying to look through the whether it's feasible. But government people are going to think, well, why would we give you a win on this when you're just going to use it as ammunition against us? So it could have quite big ramifications, as you say. One thing that I found interesting is obviously Burnham is setting out quite I guess you'd call it a more progressive, sort of left-wing in many ways agenda for the country, whereas I think the direction of travel that we've seen from the big speeches amongst Labour cabinet members, particularly like Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, is on things like immigration, moving closer to where reform is. Like after reform announced that they'd end indefinite leave to remain, Shabana Mahmood stood up and said that she is going to place limitations.
Very strict limitations, by the way. I was kind of stunned by how severe. If those rules come in, like for example, making it a 10-year route rather than a 5-year route. Obviously no criminal record, never taken any benefits. These will be the strictest rules around indefinite leave to remain that we've ever had. And I find it kind of incongruous with Keir Starmer, who was in our office on Saturday and was asked about this and said that what Reform had proposed in terms of scrapping IDL was the darkest thing they'd ever come up with. It was shocking. It was awful. And it's like, well, you've sort of gone a little bit along the way towards it with what Shabana Mahmood kind of came out with yesterday. The journalists in the room were quite surprised by the severity of the restrictions that she talked about.
And just purely as an electoral tactic, I'm struggling to see how effective it would be to sort of copy some of Reform's policies, but do it just in a sort of half-hearted way. Voters aren't going to give them any credit for that. If that's what they want to see happen in the country, they're going to vote for the real thing.
Yeah,
drink a full can of Coke rather than a Diet Coke.
We both reached for the same metaphor there. But yeah, no, you're totally right. You don't really get anywhere being sort of an imitation of something. So either, I'm not advocating this because I'm really quite vehemently against what Reform have proposed, but you're totally right. It's like, if people who believe in that stuff, they're going to vote for Reform. So this is why so many people are saying to Labour now, stand up for what you believe in. Don't try to imitate someone else. And I think people like Burnham because they're like, he comes across as pretty authentic. Like he does, he's like got big ideas and he sticks to them. Labour, it just feels like they're just blowing in the wind. And whichever way Nigel Farage is going on one day, suddenly they'll start to copy that. Then they'll say he's gone too far and he's awful. And then I think people feel like the Keir Starmer project lacks a kind of coherent vision. And is just starting to get into panic mode, really, now.
Yeah. I think another perhaps one area in which there is a clear daylight between Labour and Reform is this whole issue of clean energy, green jobs, that whole thing. Like we know exactly where Reform stands on that, and that is
steadfastly against.
Yeah, basically they don't want to subsidise it. They will scrap the net zero target if they get into government, and I think that has given a few Labour politicians an opportunity to really put some clear blue water, perhaps with an offshore wind turbine in that clear blue water.
Or a barrage.
Yes, indeed. Kim McGuinness, North East Mayor, has given a speech today and yesterday, basically setting out that if Reform get into government, she believes, or she is claiming, that 17,000 jobs will be lost in the clean energy sector in the North East. There's a lot of massive offshore wind sort of manufacturing centre in places like Port of Tyne and off the northeast coast, and if the Reform government comes in and ends the subsidies and basically disincentivises all that investment, she believes, or is saying, that those jobs could go. Say Reform say that is Project Fear, but I guess they would say that.
They have before.
Indeed. And another interesting event that I was at this week, the launch of the Labour Red Wall group that you were at as well, Jo. So obviously people know about the Red Wall. It's the sort of area, areas of the North and Midlands where, going back for decades, you would weigh Labour votes rather than counting them, until 2019, when a lot of these areas switched to the Conservatives. At the most recent election, many of them switched back to Labour, but these are now the areas where Reform are well up in the polls, and MPs are very worried about losing their seats. So we heard a very impassioned speech from Joe White, who's the MP for Bassetlaw, North Nottinghamshire, sort of ex-mining constituency, talking about the existential threat that Reform poses to MPs like her, and the fact that the government needs to get more of a red wall presence into central government. Get more MPs who have these Labour red wall voices like her in, so that they can more effectively fight against Reform and what they're offering. I mean, what did you think of that, Jo?
I think the most interesting thing about it was the presence of it was Shabana Mahmood and Darren Jones, so quite senior government figures turning up at this, and I wasn't quite sure what to read into that. Is it sort of a signal that Number 10 is listening and cares about the red wall and recognises exactly what you said, that actually it's a key area in the fight for reform, the fight against reform? Is it anything more than a signal? Are they actually listening, or are they just sort of trying to show their faces? And there was sort of a very subtle link to the whole Burnham story there as well, where the host Jo White was saying that suggested that they're supportive of Keir Starmer, which felt like a direct acknowledgement of what's been going on. We're not just Red Wall MPs who are going to now back the King of the North.
No, that was interesting. Let's move away from Burnham just briefly. May end up going back to him again. And just to say, we're recording this at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, so Keir Starmer's speech is a little bit later this afternoon. Liam is going to be going along, so at the end of this episode, we will play a little bit of live on the whistle reaction from Liam, who sat in the speech and will tell us what he thought of it. But one other thing I just wanted to mention, which was sort of an announcement that came out over the weekend, was an actual bit of policy meat that people will be interested in. New towns, which I think is a big part of Labour's plan. They want to build 1.5 million homes between now and the next election, which seems very ambitious. A large part of that is that they want to create a whole host of new towns like Milton Keynes, successors to Milton Keynes, around the country. And what was interesting to me was that the two of the three in the north are not what you would really consider to be towns in the traditional sense at all. So one of them is Leeds South Bank, which, if you know Leeds, sort of the area sort of southeast of the city, sort of post-industrial, on the edge of the city centre. There's loads of brownfield land there, some really interesting buildings like the Royal Armouries, but it is, essentially it's the edge of the city centre. It's not a town as such. And I know in Manchester, there's Manchester Victoria, one of the other areas that is being mentioned for a new town is also not really a town, is it? It's a sort
And
of
it's not really
edge of
new
the
either.
city.
It's not new at all. It's been going on for years. It's already underway. So it's quite an interesting one. So Victoria North, the idea must go back sort of a decade or so, but work has started. I mean, only last week, I think, or maybe the week before, the first sort of council estate, which is sort of a regenerated council estate. They basically moved one along in Collyhurst. They've opened the first council homes in the last couple of weeks, so it's very much already shovels in the ground. So it's not really new and it's not really a town, but it is.
But apart from that,
it's I suppose it's an opportunity for both sides. So the way that the government will look at it is, this is some, and I'm surprised they've not made more of it, to be honest, because they spoke about, I think, Leeds and 2 other projects elsewhere as sort of the most promising projects that
I wonder why.
could start by the end of the parliament. But this one actually has already started, so it's something that they can point to. It's 15,000 homes over 20 years, and now the council is saying, with this government support, which essentially will mean they can bring government departments to the table when they want to talk about opening new schools in the area, when they want to talk about a new tram stop, which they're planning to open in the area, when they're talking about GPs, they now have that sort of backing from the government to bring those departments there. That means this 20-year project could happen a bit quicker. So it's a very mutually beneficial sort of arrangement, but I don't know if it is exactly what you imagine when you say new town.
Do you think, because it's a Manchester Council-led project, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think with everything that's going on with the Mayor of Greater Manchester Council are quite keen to make it clear it's their project?
I think they've got to, right?
Yeah.
Because as we were saying earlier, I mean, we keep coming back to Burnham. It's hard not to.
It just can't stop, can we?
But they won't want to give him a win, will they?
No.
But it is very much a Manchester Council project, and as I said, it's been going on for a very long time. So I'm surprised the government hasn't sort of jumped on it even more than it has done, and sort of put it front and centre and said this is exactly what we're picturing for the rest of the country, which is sort of expansion of cities. Which that's not really very controversial. It's not like building on green fields.
I'll tell you where I didn't get a win.
Go on.
Liverpool, where we're sat right now, which was a big blow actually. So Liverpool North was the bid here, and Steve Rotherham, the Metro Mayor, and Liam Robinson, the council leader, were very excited about it. I've talked a lot about it. We sort of first revealed the plans last year. Thousands and thousands of homes, loads of brownfield sites, kind of across the north of Liverpool, up near the new Everton Stadium, which you guys will have seen well here, which is a very impressive structure, and then heading into neighbouring Sefton. When the list came out, I think, obviously it shouldn't play a part, the fact that the conference is here, but it just felt even more of a blow that the government are in town and made this big announcement, and Liverpool, which desperately needs housing and has a real opportunity there in its northern fringe, was snubbed. One of the press officers at the council sort of texted it to me and said, "No, it's a bit of a blow, but we're still planning to, come up with some plans ourselves and stuff." And I just said, it is going to be phrased as a snub, I'm afraid, because it definitely is a snub. If there was 12, I think, on the short list, was there?
Yeah.
And for Liverpool, for all that relationship that is unlike with Greater Manchester, the relationship is good between Steve Rotherham and the cabinet and the government. It felt like a big blow. In fact, Steve Rotherham went quite far in his quotes and said he was incredibly frustrated that it didn't get through. And it also gives meat for the opposition. So in Liverpool, the Lib Dems came out with some really punchy stuff, saying that it was like an absolute slap in the face from the Labour government. And Carl Cashman, who is the leader of the Lib Dems, he said, all we've heard is how great everything's going to be when you've got a Labour Metro Mayor, a Labour Council working with a Labour government. And they said here was their chance to prove it, and they've completely rejected him. So I think that's left a bit of a bad taste there, to be honest.
Yikes. Wanted to watch. Well, I know you guys have to get off to watch Keir Starmer's speech. What are your plans for the evening? More partying?
Well, yes. First of all, I'm absolutely delighted to be going along to just have a raise a glass with some of the Hillsborough families after their unbelievable success in getting Hillsborough law laid before Parliament. As you know, I was honoured to be invited down to Downing Street to see them meet with the Prime Minister and then watch the bill get laid in Parliament. Hillsborough law has been a big theme of this conference, actually. I think, A, because it's incredibly important, and B, the government's actually quite happy to have something positive that they've done that they can talk about. And it I will bang the drum for this law as long as I can, because it's not just about Hillsborough. I think sometimes people think that's a Liverpool story, but actually this is a total kind of rewiring of the justice system, including the biggest redistribution of legal aid in about a decade. So we'll be raising a toast to those guys who have campaigned for so long, and then it's off to the famous mirror party. So,
I've never been to the mirror party. Is it as good as they say?
Well, it's great, and everyone is there. You know, all the big guys are usually there. There's lots of interesting people knocking around, and of course they're our sister title. So we've got to show representation, I think.
Absolutely. And you'll be doing some karaoke, Joe?
Well, we'll see. I've not been to the mirror party myself yet, so this will be my first time.
What
so
will be your karaoke song of choice?
I usually go for duets. You see, I'm not really one for the limelight.
Well, we've got a perfect partner here.
Last time, Jonathan Ashworth, who was no longer an MP, I think he did 4 different numbers on karaoke, and I was just
selfish.
I was like, come on, that's enough. Let's let someone else have a chance. I'm only bitter because they wouldn't let me do "Let It Be" by the Beatles. I had put my name down, and then they just had, as they kept calling him, Johnny Sparkles back on again. I was like,
come on, Johnny.
Yeah, I know. But I tell you what, found last year, the West Lancashire MP Ashley Dalton has an unbelievable singing voice.
Wow,
she was absolutely stupendously good.
What was she singing? Do you remember?
I think she did. If I'm right, I think she did Bonnie Tyler's "Total Eclipse of the Heart." And did she hit those notes? I tell you,
what a tune!
She destroyed it. She dominated it. And I messaged her afterwards and just said, I can't believe how good that was. I think she might be professionally trained, but yeah, she was really, really good.
Once upon a time, there was light in my life. Now there's any love in the dark.
Yeah, it's probably quite apt actually for this current Labour government. Here we go. What would Andy Burnham do? Don't Look Back in Anger. Yeah.
Yes.
Slide Away.
Yeah. Creep by Radiohead. Anyway, well, while we consider our karaoke options, the big speech from Keir Starmer is later this afternoon. So let's cut forward to immediately after the speech. Liam Thorp has been in the audience watching, and this is what he made of it.
Hello, I am Liam Thorp, political editor at the Liverpool Echo, and I am just coming out now of the leaders' speech at Labour Party conference. Keir Starmer's just been on that stage behind me, delivering his keynote address to the conference. And my sort of snap analysis is that it was probably the strongest speech that I've heard from Keir Starmer in his last few years here at conference. And obviously it had to be. He's in a tricky spot at the moment. Many people see this as a bit of a make or break speech, and I think that he landed it, to be honest. It was quite strong on anti-racism, which a lot of people will have wanted to hear with the ongoing rise of the far right in the country. His real central message was that Britain is a tolerant and respectful and diverse place, and that went down extremely well in the room as well. There's obviously a lot of stuff about growing the economy, which has been a struggle for Labour, of course. This idea of a Britain that works for everyone is kind of that central message again. Lots of digs at reform, as you can imagine. That's clearly the big sort of existential threat for both the Labour Party and for many people in this room. So there was a lot of talk about how people like Nigel Farage just want to see decline and division, and that this Labour government is bringing people together. So I've only just got out. The vibe was pretty good in the room. There was lots of standing and cheering, lots of flag waving as well. We had Welsh flags, Scottish flags, English flags, Union flags, all in there. There was an idea of kind of recapturing the flag as part of a kind of progressive message. Whether this will be enough to see Keir Starmer sort of re-cement his position as the leader of the Labour Party, we obviously know he's facing potential challenges that have been talked about a bit at this conference. I don't know, but it was a strong speech, and it went down very well in the room.
That was what Liam Thorp thought of Keir Starmer's big conference speech. So thanks for listening and watching the Northern Agenda podcast. Thanks to Liam, thanks to Joe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.